Which NFL Combine winners could the Dallas Cowboys be targeting in round one? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys. Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is $150 if your bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, the NFL Combine has wrapped up. I didn't do any on-field drills, but I feel exhausted. I am tired. But I'm here to talk about some winners and losers, and I know you're excited to talk about these guys as well.
Yeah, I did some on-field drills, just not in Indianapolis, and none of them were timed, but I performed up to my expectations, so I'm really thrilled and excited to talk about all the other performances besides what my 3-cone time was, which was, spoiler alert, high nines. So,
that's pretty high. Yeah. All right, so before we get started, we do want to mention off the top, we know there is Tyron Smith news out there. I was going to say official news, but it's not official news. We got a tweet from Ian Rappaport that said, end of an era, Tyron Smith seems unlikely to rejoin the Cowboys. We're going to talk about that at length in tomorrow's show as we kind of gather some more news. So make sure you're on the lookout for that today. But I want to start with some of the Combine winners on the offensive line, because even if Tyron Smith does come back, that seems to be a position that the Cowboys are hunting in round one. Who are some players that stood out to you?
Man, this tackle class is this offensive line class is just one of the best I've seen in a long time. I mean, there's just a ton of really great athletes on here. There were some people on there that didn't quite live up to expectations, but I thought for the most part everyone was more athletic than kind of expected. I think for me on the offensive line, I kind of have to start with Tanner Bortolini, the center from Wisconsin.
Oh, you're going deep already. This is great.
Well, it's just, here's the thing. It's like in the course of watching these centers, right? Like we've kind of had this thought process of, okay, there's like, 4 or 5 that are kind of at the top that are all the kind of the separate from the group. And that what makes this center class kind of special, right? And it kind of cuts off at the, the Georgia kid, right underneath him, like that's kind of is right where like the line of demarcation of high quality centers that you can draft early kind of ends. I watched the kid Bortolini from Wisconsin and thought that he looked pretty good, and it looked very much similar to a typical Wisconsin center. We've seen at least one of them come through here.
2 of them. And Tyler Biadasz.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, it was easy for me to kind of like, sort of just put him in a Tyler Biadasz bucket and think of him as like this. He came out and showed you just what kind of athlete he is, right? And it's not even just like the 40 time, which again is not necessarily the kind of thing that you should be paying super attention to, at least the total 40 time. His 10-yard split was incredible, and the kind of end all be all for these guys, right, is the 20-yard shuttle, right? And he had a 4.28 20-yard shuttle was the fastest time for an offensive lineman. So I thought that him and then another guy that was, again, maybe a little bit deeper guy. We'll talk about some of the top end guys, but another guy that I really liked, I thought Dominic Pooney had a really good workout as well. Another guy who ended up running a 4.4 20-yard shuttle. His 40 time wasn't impressive, but it's not bad considering what a big guy he is, and he's basically a interior offensive lineman only type. So I thought that those guys on the interior did really well, and then on the outside, it's just watching Mims move physically, I thought, he didn't. There was lots of rumors about him running a 4.33 20-yard shuttle after the combine, which ended up not being true. But I just thought that the way he showed explosiveness and movement at that size was just incredibly impressive. Those are the guys who kind of caught my eye in the workout portion, and in the competition portion. The workouts, I thought lots of people looked really, really good. But I'm interested to hear some of your folks.
Yeah. To me, I was watching like these offensive tackles that could potentially be options for the Cowboys at 24. So that it excludes like Joe Alt, Olaf Ashanu, probably Talise Fuaga from Oregon State. Like I think all three of those guys are going to be top 12-ish picks. So I was keeping an eye on Troy Fontenot from Washington and Jordan Morgan from Arizona. Let's start with Fontenot because I do think he's the better player. Just ignoring the testing numbers for a second, I kind of thought he was the best offensive lineman in some of the drills. Like both of the so smooth, right?
Yeah. Both of the F offensive tackles, as I'm calling them, both of those guys, just like the way they move, like, they looked like linebackers, the way they're just changing direction so fluidly. And yeah, that's kind of what I was talking about, is that there was like a whole separate, different group of folks that looked impressive on the on-field drills, like in the movement skill stuff, than there was kind of in the the runs and the jumps, right? Like even like I'll give you an example, Tyler Guyton. I thought Tyler Guyton had a not great athletic testing day necessarily. I think he had a pretty decent jumps, but the 40 times were absolutely not anywhere close to what we expected in the 10 yards. But I thought that he looked really good on the field in the kind of change of direction skills and that stuff. Like he looked decent there. And I do think that there was an interesting kind of gap between the folks like, Guyton and then specifically Fontenot and all those guys that were just incredible looking in the kind of redirection drills that maybe didn't have the best testing day, or at least up to what, people were expecting.
And then I'll just throw Jordan Morgan from Arizona. Now, this is somebody that I've liked for a while, that came in at 6'5", 311 pounds. So actually a little shorter than what you typically want at offensive tackle, and a little smaller. Now the arm length just under 33 inches. So all those are smaller than what you expect from an average tackle. But the thing that stood out to me, Landon, was a 1.69 10-yard split. So here are the offensive tackles in the history of the NFL Combine that have run a 1.69 10-yard split or faster.
Let's hear it.
It's Lane Johnson, Teron Armstead, Taylor Lewan, Justin Pugh, Greg Robinson, Rashawn Slater, Samuel Cosme, Blake Freeland, who was drafted by the Colts last year, and Spencer Brown. That's it. That's the list.
That's a pretty good list of names right there.
It fits. Yeah, and it fits with what you see on the field. Like he is so quick off the ball. He's not huge, but if you want a guy that can like get to the second level and it's going to fire off the ball, that's Jordan Morgan. And I also love that I think he can play multiple positions. And I just thought this combine performance for him was really, really good. Not only just the 10-yard split, he had a 5.04 40-yard dash. He had well above average jumps. I thought he looked good.
Yeah, I mean, again, like a guy. Look, we'll talk about the Tyron Smith news and all that, and our feelings and the future of the Cowboys, but kind of through the prism of someone who had just gotten that news and watching the combine, it was crazy to watch like how many quality offensive linemen there were, and not even just like tackles, but like guys who you feel like could play both, right? Like I really was watching Jordan Morgan. I was sitting there thinking, you could draft this guy, you could put him on the left side and decide whether he's the tackle or the guard between him and Tyler Smith at some other point. That'll be incredibly useful. So I think, there were definitely just a ton of guys that were kind of like going through and impressing and really kind of making you salivate when you thought about, man, what if the Cowboys took that guy like and placed him next to Smith on either side, and just to see how where this thing goes in the future.
I really liked Matthew Bergeron last year, who the Cowboys debated at taking at 26.
Yeah.
That was kind of been my comp for Jordan Morgan, except for Morgan is the far, far better athlete. And I think his tape is even a little bit better as well. So if the Cowboys like Matthew Bergeron last year, I got to believe they're going to love Jordan Morgan And I can't wait to see what the Cowboys do there. Let's talk about some receivers, because as good as the offensive line was on Sunday,
oh man,
the receivers on Saturday were just as impressive. Let's get to them next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all of your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We want to let you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, Liam, we've got to talk about these receivers. What a receiver class this is. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Who stood out to you?
I mean, look, hard not to start with Xavier Worthy. I mean, just what he did. It's been a long time. I mean, it's been a while, I think, right? I watched a 40 that actually took my breath away. And it was the first one, I think. It wasn't even the second one, which actually broke the record. Just because, I knew that he was fast. I knew that he was going to be fast, and I knew that it was going to be not 4.3 fast. I assumed it was going to be, in the 4.2s. But I was expecting a pair of 4.29s. Like that. That's really, really fast, and that's kind of you see it on his tape. Like, he destroys angles. He's got speed that no one else has got. But you see that every year, right? You see that that kind of speed on tape in some form or another, a player here and there every year. And that doesn't necessarily, you see guys that come out there with 100, that are qualifying for the 100-meter dash in the Olympics that don't run 4.2s, that don't run 4.240. So to see him kind of come out there and basically teleport down the Indianapolis field for two different runs was crazy. Was crazy. And then for him, when they announced that he was coming back to run it again, I got so excited. I was like, oh man, he's going for it. And he just flew. It's crazy when you watch some of these guys and they run fast times, and they look, it doesn't look natural, or it still kind of looks like robotic, right? Mm-hmm. He looked about as smooth as I've ever seen anybody running. Like, it was just very little effort, and he just cruised to a 4.21. So that's obviously very impressive. I think other guys that kind of caught my mind just with their performance. A.D. Mitchell, I thought, at that size to run that speed, that's just really, really impressive. You combine that with what you see on tape, really, really great day for him. I thought Brian Thomas, I get his name wrong, the LSU kid.
Holy
man,
cow.
I mean, that size to run that speed, I think that's one thing that kind of got overlooked a little bit by Worthy's 40, was that Brian Thomas ran a very extremely fast speed.
4.33.
Yeah, at 209 pounds, if I'm not mistaken. So that kind of just shows you the size speed combination that you have with him. Who else you got? I mean, I'm trying to think.
Well, I just want to go back to Worthy really quickly.
Yeah, please.
I've seen a lot of people saying that you shouldn't raise Worthy up your rankings based off the 40, which I 100% agree.
Count it twice.
We knew he was fast, right?
Yeah.
Did we know he was all-time fast? No, I don't think so. But this was somebody who had a really good speed profile coming into the NFL Combine. Yeah. I just always thought he should have been probably a late first-round pick anyways. And for that reason, I think he has to be somebody who's on the Cowboys' radar. I know people are concerned about the weight. However, the NFL has really gotten a lot looser when it comes to the weight restrictions, right? Like, I think it was before the 2021 draft. We never had a receiver in the first round under 185 pounds, and Devontae Smith went 10th overall, weighing 170 pounds. Tutu Atwell's 155 pounds, now becoming a good receiver for the Rams.
Yes.
Tank Dell was 166 last year and was having an awesome rookie season. So it's not ideal, but you can live with it. Like when you have that type of speed, the other thing, like if I'm comparing him to like a Tank Dell receiver, he's 20 years old. Tank Dell was 24 as a rookie. Like this is a really young receiver coming out of Texas who has had 3 straight years of at least 800 total yards on offense. The Cowboys have a lot of needs, including offensive tackle, corner, linebacker, but I do think they've been missing this type of receiver for a while. I'm not advocating for the Cowboys to draft him at 24, but man, it's tempting.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't understand why these types of receivers aren't more highly coveted, right? Like this is you get a lot of these guys. I think I just made the point, right? You get a lot of these guys that come in every single year that are they hold the state record for the 100-meter dash in their state, right? They are the fastest player in UCLA track history, or just outrageous resumes that can't come in here and break 4.3 and a 40. Nope. That's just how hard it is, right? So if you've got a guy who not only broke 4.3 and then on top of that broke the actual 40 record, and on top of that is he's not just like a guy who runs really fast who will catch the ball occasionally. I mean, he's a fully a developed receiver. He runs routes with precision.
It's not like McCole Hardman coming out of Georgia.
Yeah, exactly.
You weren't sure if he was a defensive back or a receiver. Like, remember that conversation? Like, he was legitimately considered a cornerback that they were trying to make a receiver. This is somebody who is produced for 3 years at a big time school. But even going back to McCole Hardman, on the game-winning play that the Chiefs had this year in the Super Bowl, who did they target? It was McCole Hardman because he was so fast he was going to get to the pylon before anybody else could. Those guys have a lot of value.
Yeah, so I guess the point is that I mean, I think the Cowboys should consider him. They're going to have a lot of other stuff going on, right? But he shows that he kind of deserves that marking. And outside of that, I felt like, for the most part, I didn't see a ton of disappointments athletically testing wise for the wide receivers. No, I felt like
the only one is Keon Coleman from Florida State, which
I was just going to point him out.
His profile is really interesting because if you look at like the relative athletic score, RAS, he's still tested in like the 95th percentile despite running a 4.6. But you do worry a little bit about that long speed in terms of creating separation and stuff.
But then he turns around and goes and runs the gauntlet, and it looked about as pretty as anyone on that. Like, his hands are so natural that like it makes sense. So I just want to point out, I really, really appreciate and love the addition of the GPS miles per hour tracking that they're giving us on this. That really kind of gives you a good idea of some of the functional speed that these guys have in their drills, especially like I thought the running back one where they were like dipping around the obstacles, and you got to see like how Bucky Irving didn't lose any speed, like getting through the pads and everything. So I just wanted to throw that out, that I thought that was really like an incredible addition there. But yeah, I thought that frankly, the wide receivers top to bottom all pretty much had really great days. I will throw out one thing that I thought was interesting and that we have to start noticing as a trend. Top end wide receivers not fully participating in the combine. Like that was kind of an interesting wrinkle this year that I did not expect from the top two guys, that basically, I mean, they basically didn't participate in the combine.
No, Malik Neighbors didn't even measure in. Like, he just said no thanks.
So that's something that's just to keep an eye on for the future. I wonder if agents are going to start trying to pull back some of the power on some of these testing things. Especially with the injuries that happened at the end, right?
Yeah, it's possible that you also see somebody like Roma Dunze go out there and crushed all the drills, crushed all the testing, and now people are wondering, like, hey, could he potentially be the second receiver off the board after a huge combine? So I agree with you. One more receiver that I just wanted to mention really quickly before we move on. I thought Ladd McConkey. I mean, for him running in the 4.3s, I mean, he's going to get some bad comparisons because he's a white receiver from Georgia, right? But like, he's legitimately fast, and he showed like in the gauntlet drill how smooth he is. The route running stuff was incredible. Like, I don't see any reason why he shouldn't be a first round pick.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's easy. I think we all have our biases here. We all view this player and try to imbue him with sneaky athleticism and all that stuff. But a guy who runs incredible routes at an incredible high speed, who produced at a high level at a national championship Division I college, like, guys,
sign me up.
It's time to start thinking that the guy may be just a very good wide receiver. I don't know that you need to add caveats to it.
No.
I think we get it. He's white, but I think there's been history of good wide receivers. I just think there's too much evidence that he's good. I think everyone's looking for the rub. Oh, he can't quite run this route, or oh, he's not quite as fast as he looks. He's more quick than fast. No, he's more fast and quick, and he can play inside, outside. I think he can play everywhere. I'm a big fan, and I think he's going to be lumped in with a lot of these other kind of sneaky athletic
somewhere between Wes Welker and Joe Jurevicius.
He's not that, man. He's so much more athletic and so much more dominant, and I think he should be considered a guy that maybe on some team at some point will be a number one wide receiver. As of now, I think he's at the very least a super, super high end wide receiver too.
All right, let's talk about some other sleepers from the NFL Combine that could be potential targets for the Cowboys. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. What's the first thing that you'd do if you had an extra hour in your day? Would you go for a run? Would you take a nap? Would you read a book? Show up for a friend? A lot of us spend our lives wishing that we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time wasn't limited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so that you can go and do more of it. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's done entirely online. It's designed to be convenient and flexible and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for any reason at no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Just visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Everydayers, on tomorrow's show, we're going to break down the Tyron Smith situation from every single angle, including should the Cowboys move on? Should they try to retain him? What makes the most sense long-term? So make sure you tune in for that. But Lena, let's talk just quickly about some of the players that stood out to us that we want to mention from the NFL Combine.
Man, just so many different guys that that I had eyes on that really kind of were performing unequally to what I thought they were going to. I think one of the biggest performer guys that I had on my eyes on, and I'm going to screw up his name. I've already screwed it up earlier. Was Quentin Mitchell, right? From Toledo.
Mitchell. Yep.
Quentin Mitchell from Toledo. We saw him have an incredible Senior Bowl day. We saw the speed. We saw the coverage. And I think that, I wanted to see that kind of confirmed with the athletic testing, especially with some of these guys who play some of the little bit of a lower competition. When you're taking them in the first round, it's good to have the athletic testing just to kind of, again, put them up with the big boys a little bit, just to kind of get an apples for oranges comparison. And he blew away all the corners, all of them. Tyron came in and didn't perform, I think, as well as I thought expected him to. I thought that Mitchell was the guy of the corners that really, as we're kind of getting into the final pitches for these guys, right? They start to go into their pro days here in a couple weeks. I just think that as we stand today, Mitchell has had the best start to finish draft season
process.
Maybe definitely for all the cornerbacks, but maybe for any prospect in this class so far. He just put out another incredibly impressive performance, especially in light with everything else that was going on with Kool-Aid and with Tyrion and everything. So it's really, really, really impressive.
I've got two guys that I want to mention really quickly. Cooper Beebe, the guard from Kansas State. Now, listen, there's some knocks on him. He's got 31.5-inch arms, which is about the shortest I've ever seen for a guard. but he was awesome in the athletic testing. If you've never watched this tape before, he is a short but really, really stout guard that had a 5.03 40-yard dash, a 1.75 10-yard, which is absolutely insane, and then a 7.4 3-cone. Like if the Cowboys decide to ignore offensive line in round one, but they want to try to grab like a starting caliber player on day two, I think Cooper Beebe can be a day one starter, probably at left guard. You kick Tyler Smith over to left tackle. I thought he had an outstanding day.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think one of the things that really kind of made me hopeful in the light of all the kind of conversation around Tyron was just, because the Cowboys have Tyler over on the left side, you have a bunch of options to kind of choose that. Like you don't have to just be choosing from this tackle class. You can be looking at the guard class and take some of these guys a little bit further down and they could, potentially give you essentially what you're looking for too. We talked about the Jackson Power Johnsons of these days, but I want to talk about guys like Christian Haynes. Again, a guy that I noticed at Senior Bowl that I thought like had something to his game a little bit. I thought he came out and kind of showed you a little bit of what he can do as an athlete in there. And I think that there's just a lot of these kind of guys who, you mentioned Beebe. I thought there were, a couple other guys that kind of showed you as down the thing. I think Blake Fisher is another guy that I thought was really impressive. The Notre Dame tackle. He's a little bit raw.
Yeah. Yep.
If you wanted to take a guy and kind of develop him a little bit, I thought he showed you the kind of athleticism that you wanted to see. There was also just a couple other centers that showed up a little bit better. That's the thing that I thought was really interesting about the center class in this draft is that we knew about all the top end guys, but then I talked about my buddy Barton Tortellini, as I call him. But there's also guys beneath them, right? That there's other guys. Duke has a whole other center that they brought into this class that had some nice testing. I'm gonna have to go back and watch his tape. It helps that I've already got all that downloaded, right? Because I went and watched his teammate, but I'm trying to get his name real quick. But anyways, I thought he looked really good in the drills and kind of showed you a little bit something. And it was just interesting to kind of go and see. Look, we know about the Lathams and the Fashanus and the Alts, and I mean, obviously, we're learning more about the Fuagas and the rest of those guys, right? But the Fontenus, but the kind of middle class of interior offensive linemen that are going to be available, in probably the 2nd through 4th round, 5th round. It's pretty impressive as well. And it certainly provides you with an option that if you decided you wanted to kick Tyler back out to tackle to take Tyron Smith's place, you could not necessarily have to spend your 1st round pick on a Tyron Smith replacement. You spend a 1st round pick somewhere else. Maybe you send a 2nd round pick on a quality starting level interior offensive lineman that gives you an upgrade from where you were. I think that's starting to make more sense as we start to see some of this competition that played out yesterday.
Last one for me, Trey Benson from Florida State. Not really a sleeper, but the combine does a pretty good job of helping separate some of these running backs. They were all kind of clumped between like on the consensus board picks 70 through 100. Trey Benson goes out there and runs a 4.39 40-yard dash at 216 pounds. He had above average jumps as well. He's just one of these ones where he checks every single box in terms of production, being able to play on all 3 downs, and now the athleticism with Jonathan Brooks still coming back from the ACL, with Bucky Irving having a up and down testing day, with Braylon Allen not testing, with Audric Estime running in the 4.7s. I thought Trey Benson had an outstanding day on Saturday.
Yeah, and just one more guy along those lines who kind of more checked boxes than really like blew you away. I thought Blake Corum was a guy, that you just weren't expecting extreme testing numbers for, but he checked a ton of boxes. And for a guy that you have a ton of great tape on, and really the knock is what's the athletic upside there, for him to kind of go out and show you that he's better than average athlete. It's not that he's a below average athlete. No. With his tape, I think is a great combination.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Again, go check out the YouTube channel. We post videos every single day over there. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Everydayers, we will talk about the Tyron Smith situation, so make sure you tune in for that. Go follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.